I just went live. I'm trying to get my glasses so that. Are you gonna come in here?
Yeah, I'll be in there.
Okay. It's already live, so I'm just waiting.
Are you sitting there making small talk with me while you're live?
Nobody's here yet. I need chapstick. Let's be real, people. We cannot be trying to handle live without chapstick. It's out of control. There's one viewer. Hello. I don't know who you are. Sorry while I apply chapstick. Y'all, I am a mess today. My goodness gracious. I apologize for this. Why can't I see any comments? What is going on here? Hello, everybody. I see that there's 6 people watching. Oh, no comment. Oh, they changed the dashboard. Okay. Well, put in the comments, who are you? Where are you from? Hey, Allison. What's up, fam? Hey, Andrea. I always get confused. I don't know if it's Andrea or Andrea. But hello, Miss Ward. Hello, Sylvia. Yes, I see you with your profile picture being the one race, one people. Yes. Hey, Rachel. Girl, chapstick is an all-around necessity. Let's just be honest. Rachel, we've been praying for you. Hope you are doing well. Hope you're doing well. You guys, gonna let some more people jump on. It is freezing in California. I just got back, so I I got back from Minneapolis. Kristen and I did together on Hey Miss Kathy Lou on Monday, and then Tuesday morning I drove to Phoenix to go see my mom. And I just got back home about an hour ago, maybe an hour and a half ago. So y'all, I'm looking rough. My goodness gracious. Y'all, this called that car look. Ooh, but y'all, that car look. Y'all, hey Candy. Y'all, the Lord had to really work with me on my drive back home. Cause it's a quick trip. It's about 4 hours and like 15-20 minutes. Y'all, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you straight out, I don't have no patience when it comes to traffic and driving. Like, just get in your car, do what you gotta do. So here we go. Like the mileage is 75 because we're on the hey Miss Millie, we are on the open highway, so it's just we 75 now. At 70 with 75 miles an hour, I'm gonna go about 80, 81, but I'm never gonna go like too close to 85 because I feel like if I'm hitting 10 miles over, then they can pull me over. So y'all, I'm doing like 81, 82-ish. And this car gonna pull up on me like we knew each other. I was like, yo, whoa. I'm gonna need you to calm all the way down. You're gonna take it back a couple of knocks, bruh. So then they decide, well, my 82 isn't good enough for them. And they just gonna stay steady, just riding steady. Y'all, and I see here's the thing. I'm listening to my worship music. Me and Cece, we just going in. We just worshiping. But when I noticed this, I was pulled all the way out. So then this person gonna try to go around me, and then this big old like weird looking van. And at that point, I was like, oh no, you don't get to just go around me. And I'm doing 82, I will do 100 to make sure that you can't go around me. Y'all, now, unfortunately, I was only convicted after said incident when I went 100 to make sure that they couldn't get, because you wasn't getting around me today, not today. But when he had to cut back over, and now he's trapped between the big 18-wheeler on this side. And then, me, we didn't took that all the way down to 64 because I was like, if my 82 wasn't good enough for you, I'm gonna go ahead and stay in line with this truck at 60. Y'all, I'm telling you, I'm such a mess. I am such a mess. So yes, the Lord he was like, what is going on with y'all? Add it to your heart. And I was just like, I don't see any conflict between my worship and how I'm treating this guy behind me. You guys, there is a problem. Please pray for my heart. But I think, in some ways, I think we all kind of deal with something where it's like, this isn't really an attitude that is honoring of God. Yes, y'all, some of y'all, we could ride deep together. Okay. There was even one point where this van was trying to get around me and this other minivan came and swooped in and we was like, We was in cahoots. You guys, we had like a little system to make sure this guy couldn't go around. You guys, this is so bad. It's so bad. But um, I was like, Lord, this is an area where I'm gonna have to grow in. And I really want my heart and my life to be honoring to God, but in that moment I wasn't. It was definitely not. But I just thought it was interesting to notice how my heart could be so not for someone, and a little bit like just a little ruthless, a little cold in that moment. And yet at the same time, I did not see any conflict between that and the fact that here I am singing my heart out to Jesus and being in worship. There's some conflict there. So I don't know. That was my little story, part of my thoughts on my 4.5 hour drive home. But yeah, you guys pray for my heart. I'm telling you, pray for it. So this is why I stay off highways unless I have no choice. Rachel, you have reasons to stay off highways. Yes. Yes, yes. Um, we are visiting the South right now. Those big semi trucks are crazy out there. They are going 80 plus and passing us. What in the world? Yes, I'm telling you. But at that moment, that semi truck was only doing 64. So car rows behind me. I was like, this man done messed everybody up. We all doing 64 today. I don't care if we have to do 64 from Phoenix to LA. I don't even live in LA. I live an hour before LA. We gonna all do 64 today. Y'all, such a mess. Such a mess. Hey Amy. You guys, we made it back home from Phoenix, and I just thank you for praying. Not Phoenix, from Minnesota. Thank you. She over here in the wings, y'all. Thank you for praying for us and for the students, the families that were there. You guys, it was out of control. There were 3,200 kids, and the place where we were still wasn't packed out. It seats almost 5,000. It's a church, and we had, because of like restrictions and all of that and spacing, we had 3,200 kids, and it was amazing. We were in Minnesota, so what?
Eden Prairie.
Eden Prairie, yeah, Eden Prairie. But I mean, it's right outside of Minneapolis, right where George Floyd happened. We actually drove by the George Floyd Memorial and all of that. And people just have a lot of questions. This stop on our tour was, to me, the roughest stop. We did LA or Santa Ana, and then we did Seattle, and those were fine, but there was something just different about being in Minneapolis. I think the questions were a little different. They were a little harder. I heard stories of racism on both sides that just stuck me, like struck me a little harder. The real impacts of racism, and how I'm not just talking about like systemic racism where it's everywhere, but like personal, interpersonal racism, things that are happening, like just person to person, and how young kids are losing friends for not, standing up. But, just the confusion. And I love the fact that Stand to Reason's conference is actually called, their theme this year anyway, is Chaos to Clarity, and how the gospel actually brings clarity to a lot of these issues. How do we understand, the Christian faith in relation to issues like racism? How does it have impact? What does it have to say about that? I truly believe that the scripture does have a lot to say about that. But the kids that came up to us, the stories that we heard, to some degree were heartbreaking, to hear of the racism that happened before George Floyd, and then how it heightened up after George Floyd, and things like that. But then to hear the stories of clarity, we had one girl, and she was a young Black girl, and she walked up to me and was like, Monique, when I sat down in that chair, and I'm the second speaker on the first day, she goes, when I sat down in my chair at the beginning of the night, I completely was the person who hated white people just because they were white. And she goes, and then I listened to your talk, and then I came to your breakout, and I realized that that's not the way for me to live as a Christian. That's not the way that God has called me to live. We are family, and I get to live in relationship with other brothers and sisters, no matter what their skin color is, as family. I don't have to look at them with suspicion. I don't have to, hold the hatred in my heart. She was like, we'll talk about how we walk out in unity, but we really are family. And when she said that, I was just blown away, because you never know who's in the audience. You never know who's the person listening to you. When I start my talk, I started very strong. It's very strong words. And in case anyone's, listening, who's going to be attending, in the future, I'm not going to say what I say when I start, but the words are very strong. And if you are not, one, aware of who I am and the ministry that Krista and I have, you would immediately think that, I held a certain position one way or another. And I think when I began to speak, she thought that I held a certain viewpoint. Many people thought that I held a certain viewpoint. And to see the progression of my talk, to see that I actually don't hold the view that I start out with, and what has changed my mind on some of these things, and where God has brought me from, to hear her being at the beginning of this journey now, man, it just took my breath away. I was completely floored. And the other stories too, stories of, white students or parents who don't know where to put their identity because the culture is really confusing. How do I respond to the fact that whiteness is wicked, or that I need to divest myself of my whiteness or my white privilege? And how do I begin doing that? What is that? There's a lot of questions that, even though reality is like a kid conference, a teen conference, there's a lot of questions that people have all the way across the board. I've talked with grandparents who did not come with kids at all, but they want to know how to answer some of these questions for their kids. And so Minneapolis was a very special place. It was just very different than the first two. And I'm so glad, that it was different, because it spoke into the entire conference, not just like my piece, but the entire conference spoke into, some very real and painful situations. And so I'm thankful for Greg Kokel and his team. Y'all, I must be missing something, because here come Krista. She didn't came in with her chair and everything. She said, hold up. But one of the things I do want to say too about Minnesota and Minneapolis is we toured the area. We went by the store where George Floyd was killed outside of. We toured the riot areas and all of that, and it's devastating. It is heartbreaking to, I lived through the 92 riots, and to see all of the destruction and all of the resources that are now out of that area. And much of what I assume about the area is that it's a lower socioeconomic area anyway. And so when we look at the limited resources that were there anyway, to see those limited resources even being burned down and removed, I have to wonder, where do the elderly go for their doctors or for prescriptions? Where do they shop at for groceries and things like that? And so it was a rough ride, but it was good. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say a couple things about my experience at Reality in Minneapolis. I think my aunt and uncle came the Friday night.
Yes.
And they had never heard Monique speak before. And so that was a lot of fun. And some of you might remember my aunt and uncle. I had them on my podcast in the spring to talk about their daughter who's disabled and their journey with her. So they came to hear Monique speak, and that was a lot of fun. They were really glad. What really struck them was how engaged all the students were. Like, my uncle's been in ministry a long time. He's a former associate pastor at a really big church there in Twin Cities. And he's out of the ministry now. He's retired, but he said, there was no screwing around with the students. They were engaged right from the time Monique started talking. They were taking notes, and he couldn't believe it. He just had never seen anything like it. And it really, I think, touched them to see some hope for the next generation. And then on Sunday, my aunt and uncle were the ones that drove us down to the George Floyd area, and we took some video. Unfortunately, Facebook's kind of dumb in their interface here, so we can't play the video back, but maybe we can do that at some point. But yeah, it just was really sad to see everything that was going on down there, and the devastation and the trauma on all sides. Like, my uncle took us right to this little shop where George Floyd had the incident, and right outside, and it is definitely a more impoverished area. There's just cars everywhere, and graffiti and
BLM and
ad hoc
yeah
memorial things and all kind of weird stuff.
One of the things that like Uncle Virgil said, all the kids taking
this
notes.
is my Uncle Virgil, not Virgil Walker.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We have multiple uncles. That the kids taking notes. I think that's what stuck out to me too, is that the students that attended this reality were so serious. They didn't want none of the jokes. They didn't want they were there for the information. They wanted to take notes. They had questions that were blowing us away. People were coming up to me after and asking good questions. I think same with Krista. Yeah. They were here for all of it
because they lived through the trauma.
Yes.
And it really impacted the community. I think Virgil said it really well of that they were. Now, you can't be drinking that on camera. It's too noisy. Put that down.
Yeah. I feel a system. You better leave me alone. I need this hot water. It's cold. Excuse me. Girl, you go ahead and keep talking.
No, because it's so noisy on camera.
Not. They can't
It's
hear
horrible. It's gross. All right. So, but what he said was that many people in the suburbs, and the way that Minneapolis is built, the nice areas of Edina, for example, is right backed up to the more downtown areas. And so he said that the wide impression there was that many people were like, what did we do? How did this even happen, that people are this angry? It really caught them off guard, that was the reality. And then they were left to try to process this all on their own. And a lot of all the resources that were offered was really just the media narrative or woke churches, or because there's a lot of progressive churches there.
We didn't hear it.
Okay,
sorry,
good.
Krista.
Okay, good. Yes. So that was just such a difficult. I'm so glad that they took us down there, though. I mean, Verge drove us all the way down to that downtown area after church.
Yeah, I mean,
we would have gotten out too, but it was a little cold.
Oh yeah, no. And Melissa's in the chat. We did a meetup in St. Paul, and had 30 people there. It was awesome.
Oh, it was a lot
so
of people.
Cool.
It was so great.
We had a lot of fun. So thankful for
Jacob was there.
Yes.
Jacob helped at our table, and he was at the meetup.
He built us a stand for our sign. I said, Lord, won't he do it?
Go check out Jacob's YouTube channel. It's so cool. He does rehabs old furniture and stuff. He's Jake of all trades.
Yes.
On YouTube. It's awesome. Beth was at the meetup.
Yes. Okay, this is what else
Monique's
I was going to say.
new best friend
is her son Joel.
Yes. Her son Joel.
Yes. Yes. He was at my breakout and everything. I said yes. But the reality of sin. Everyone wants to say, I've been home for 12 minutes.
Well, when you do that, it
12 minutes.
It amplifies on the microphone. So
anyway, the reality of sin I'm gonna rebuke you.
I know.
But when I looked at the George Floyd situation, all of it, like, and people will say, well, this is nothing but systemic racism. This is nothing but police brutality. This is da 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 da. And could there be arguments for that? Sure. Could there not be? Sure. Do we need more, statistical data about that? Sure. But what I do know is that this is the result of sin. This is like, we are sinful humans, and one sin bumped up against somebody else's heart that has sin, and that heart bumped up against another heart, and the sin continued, and the outworking of that sin completely just decimated an area, a neighborhood.
Yeah.
And trauma, I'm sure people are traumatized by it.
Yeah, and I know one of the things you were interested in when you were in South Africa was studying community trauma, which is something that is not a super developed discipline yet. There's not a ton of research out there. It's a growing amount. But Jacob says he'll build you a mug stand.
Please. Please.
But I think that when we were driving down
Hey,
there,
Kevin.
the thought that I had was, man, there's a ton of churches around that area. And it really made me wonder, like, yeah, there was a lot of energy to protest and to kneel and to do all the steps of anti-racism, when things were heightened. But now those people are just devastated who live down there. And Virgil, as an older person, he immediately said, well, where do these people go to buy medicine? Like, what happens to the older people? Where do they go to the doctor? And it made me wonder, like, I wonder if, so, it just made me sad, like, it made me wonder too, like, what churches are doing things to help resource that community in that area, because there's tons of churches in the Twin Cities. Like John Piper's church, like, you could practically throw a rock there. It's not that far away, and it's a historic church. It's downtown. Like, okay, John Piper gives a lot of sermons about justice and race conversations, but what are they doing to, or any churches down there doing to, like, help with some of the devastation and the mindsets and to rebuild the ruins and helping people find doctors and restoring banks, and what is the schools like down there, and what could Christians do to really be light in those dark places and to bring hope and rebuilding the community and families and discipleship and financial literacy and entrepreneurship and all of these things that would provide biblically based uplift for that community. Like,
instead of another social program that keeps people dependent upon a system.
Yeah.
Like, we want to talk about systemic injustice, keeping someone dependent upon a system. That's an injustice when human agency is so important to our thriving.
Yeah, Joel says he drives in that area almost daily, and he's listening right now, and that's awesome. And I guess my heart was so burdened, like, what creative things could Christians start to do down there to bring hope and renewal to that area, and not get so embattled in the politics and everything that happened, but just to come bring light and life to that community. And instead of going, yeah, I know, Melissa, John Piper's church is going through a hard time, but even so, like, my point is that there are a ton of churches down there. Like, we drove by 45 of them on our way there, and there is so much that could be done. And I feel like, where's that energy? Like, there was so much energy from social justice advocates for doing the works and kneeling and the protests, but where's the energy of the long-term, grind it out, being a lighthouse in that community to really see, a way forward?
Well, you know what? Part of what I think is, especially, like, so there's a big lake down there, and they have, like, all these nice houses by this lake.
Oh, she's talking about Lake Harriet, for those who are in the area.
And what I noticed with a lot of the churches that are in that area, they all have an LGBTQ plus flag. They all have the Black Lives Matter flag. And so I wonder how many churches in that area are actually historic in their doctrine, or have they moved over to a more progressive ideology? Like
But
I
even
think
if
that
they're
you're
progressive,
asking.
where are they?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the and I mean, you can tell me if you think that's wrong, but I think that the more progressive stand wouldn't necessarily bring them into to those communities in that way. I don't know. Like,
But
does
they're
that
the
make
ones who
sense?
are flying the flag of social justice. And my question is, where is any Christian presence, progressive or historic Christian? It's like, it just was so,
It was like a vacuum.
yes. And it felt like just all the life had been sucked out of that area. And it made me wonder, you know, what some a few churches with some creativity. There's a lot of money there. That is an
Mm-hmm.
affluent area that's right a few miles away. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what could some creativity and a biblical vision do to help partner with people who live in that community? There's got to be community leaders who are down. I'm not talking about politicians and Ilhan Omar, who's apparently their representative in Congress. I'm not talking about the political system. I'm talking about, like,
Long-term sustainable, not just a backpack program,
yeah,
but like working with parents to understand, how do you budget, how do you save, how do you start a business, what are the steps to becoming an entrepreneur, what does it look like to open a grocery store in that area and to have money come back into the community,
yeah.
because
So
the reality is it's much harder to change people and culture than it is to hashtag and argue for certain social policies.
that's
Yes.
exactly my point, Kevin. And so it's like, when people are waving the social justice flag, cool, that's fine. But my question in the back of my mind is, thinking about the George Floyd area where the whole thing happened, is, where are they? Where are those
Well,
people?
Elaine has a good comment, and you know what? Somebody mentioned Voli Bakum, and I was just listening to his book on my drive home. She says, "Do they not trust Christians who aren't waving the right flag? And do flag waving churches think that's all they need to do and read the books?" And I actually think that that's a big component to it. I think that the way that the current critical social justice or critical social theories have set things up, Christians are oppressive. Christians are an oppressive category because of hegemony. We all and not we all, but within the critical social justice framework, there is the hegemony. So then you have the people who oppress and you have those who are oppressed, and Christianity is set up as a dominant worldview or a dominant theory. And if it's a dominant view or theory, then who is going to be the one who is being oppressed? Anyone who may not subscribe to it, any minority, any religious minority. And so if you get a white evangelical, to come into George Floyd's neighborhood, well, I think a lot of that conversation is already set up that says we aren't going to trust you. But I also think on the other side of that, that conversation is set up that says we shouldn't even try.
Well, and that's the thing is, okay, let's just take it out of Minneapolis for a second
Mm-hmm.
and say that, I feel God's calling me to be a missionary and to go to in a cross cultural situation, right? When I get there, they're not going to be like immediately embracing of me. They're going to be distrusting. I'm going to have to engage in a lot of conversations and winning some collateral with people before they're going to be willing to hear the gospel. But that doesn't stop us.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't, I mean, because we think the gospel is bigger than that.
Yeah.
It's more transformational than that. But I wonder how often Christians who are on our side of the conversation, on a more biblically conservative side, actually believe that the gospel changes things.
Well, I think that goes down to identity, and to even the thing that I wrote on my Facebook page yesterday about knowing who we are and who God has called us to be. I think part of the conversation of identity has gotten lost, and it's gotten, along with the message of the gospel in a lot of ways to me, has, are you okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
You got some garbage down here. My foot
I don't
was,
have y'all.
my foot
You
was-
you is wrong. you wrong. We talking to all these people. You're like, you got garbage. You're wrong.
Okay.
Anyway, I think that these
It's just imaginary garbage. Sorry, people.
I can't with you, rebuke. I think that because we don't have a clear grasp on what is the gospel, and I think that it's evident that we don't always have a clear grasp on what is the gospel, because people can be like, social justice is the gospel, and people be like, oh, social justice is the gospel. They just hop on it. But that impacts who we are. What is our identity? Who are we? If we don't understand who we are, then we aren't going to understand what we've been called to and why. And so if I don't understand what I've been called to, or why God is calling me to something, what reason do I have to go out and to evangelize, to go out and to make an impact in another area? Well, at that point, I feel like if I don't know who I am, I'm just going to adopt whatever the culture says about me. So now if I'm white, well, I'm fragile. Me and my privilege, I just need to listen to the oppressed voices and not go in unless I am invited by all the people. I shouldn't really, say anything. I can't speak against their truth, but speaking against their truth could actually bring life.
Yeah, I think.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that along with that, or what I hear you saying in that is, don't wait for the culture or social justice warriors to give you permission to go in and make a difference and preach the gospel.
Yeah, like, because you should know who you are.
Yeah, if you really believe the gospel transforms, you want to go everywhere with that. But Christians now are so hung up on all these imaginary problems in the sense of or limitations of why they can't go. And the gospel won't.
They're
really...
cultural limitations.
Yeah, but they're partially imaginary. They're frameworks in people's minds. They're not established on truth. They're not established on the truth of Scripture. They're lies. And so, why? It was just so sad to me to reflect on. This is such a hopeless and devastating place down here. It just made me wonder, what could Christians do? And I'll bet, I'm not saying that I have data for this, but I'll bet there's more openness to anybody coming down there if they're willing to grind it out and really be committed to the community and helping them. And they actually wouldn't care. They'd care for about 10 minutes that you're a white person, but if you keep
or any other ethnicity.
Yeah, if you keep showing up and you keep going with them and you keep working it and you keep trying to support them and help them, then they would welcome that, because they have been kind of left alone. And so, yeah, there is a strong LGBTQ presence in the neighborhood. All of those things are true. And we shouldn't be letting that stop us. Mm-hmm. And we should be able to just say, so what? I'm going anyways. Because at some point, a missionary went to China and I'm trying to remember the name of the guy, the pioneer in Chinese missions, Hudson Taylor. He was a white guy, went to bring the gospel to the Chinese. The impact of that is still there today. So I think it's just, at some point we've got to get past all of those things and go anyways. We've got to put that aside and go anyways, because those people need help. And I don't think that race or LGBT or any of our issues would matter once they started experiencing the true transforming impact of the gospel. We can't spend all our energy trying to get our doctrine correct if we never actually show up for people. That's what I'm trying to say. Mm. And we got a lot of energy right now in conservative circles of getting the doctrine correct. And I'm all for correct doctrine. I'm all for it. I am here for the correct doctrine today. But if all we do is spend our energy getting the doctrine correct, but we never actually go out and do anything,
Yep.
then we're like a clanging gong. We're not really.
And that, yes, that was going to be my next thing to talk about was, I received some feedback about, yes, identity impacts unity, but love is the foundation. So where is the conversation of love? But I think you're hitting on it. Like, there has to be an understanding of who we are so that we can understand how do we go out and actually love on people from a correct standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So if I am unclear as to who I am, if I just think that if I was white, that, well, I just operate from a place of privilege and I'm just fragile and I just need to listen to the voices and I can never correct, and this and this and all these things that I think culture keeps telling us, well, I'll never reach out. I'll never go and extend my hand to someone else because, well, love would compel me just to listen. But that's not necessarily, I feel like, the way that scripture would tell us to love. Like, how do we also reach our hand across? How do we also correct someone in love? How do we also evangelize and speak the truth in love? Love, it is like we need to listen, and that's a biblical principle, but we also need to be out there, that we also can cross the street and say, hey, look, I actually have something, a resource that will help you and the generations after you.
And because a lot of this, going back to Kevin's comment earlier, is about changing culture. And this is changing a cultural mindset. Mm-hmm. That's the hard work to be done. I think about Pastor Alton Hardy down in Fairfield, Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
he don't know it, but he about to be my favorite cousin.
He is grinding
Mm-hmm.
it out in an impoverished area. The houses there are literally collapsing.
No, just already collapsed, just on the ground.
And there's literally no stores. There, everything in the whole downtown is boarded up, except all of a sudden you drive up and there's a church.
Mm-hmm.
And across the street is the city hall. And in his vision for discipleship, the gospel, discipling men, building families, he on faith has built classrooms for babies, so there can be a nursery, so there can be Sunday school. Even though the abortion rates are so high in his community, he is by faith saying, I'm going to actually build rooms in my church for babies, so when they come here, and these men I disciple, these families that we're going to build, they're going to have babies, and we're going to build a legacy, a multi-generational legacy. We're going to build a grocery store. We're going to create jobs. We're going to teach entrepreneur skills.
We're going to teach people to get married.
Yeah.
Like that. How horrible is it that somewhere around 70 to 73% of Black kids are born to out of wedlock mothers? Yeah. And at some point in their life, it's almost near 80% of Black children will live without their father in the home.
And so while so many public schools are going off the CRT rails, in Fairfield, Pastor Hardy has a wide open door to bring the gospel to public school, because that's how dark it is. They want hope. They want real hope, and not another social program. And so it's like, I'm looking at these two areas and I'm thinking, like, yeah, we need some biblically faithful Christian like Pastor Hardy to come into that area and get a prophetic vision for what could be. And that to me is what is lacking, is like, where's the prophetic vision of what could be? Not stop looking at what is. Stop looking at all the brokenness and the stupid politics and well, this is the churches there are feckless and there's a lot of LGBT advocacy. Forget all that. Actually believe the gospel and go in there and do this. It's like, it's just, I'm wondering, like, where are those creative thinkers? Yeah, Jacob's talking about Take Charge Minnesota. That we had some sisters come to our meeting that are affiliated with them, really trying to make an impact in the schools there. So anyways, that's my little rant.
Well, there
about
it is.
Minneapolis.
Kevin said he thinks Pastor Alton is replacing him as
Your favorite cousin?
It's not true. I was just trying to make sure you was paying attention.
We want to make sure you're still there.
Yes. Not true. But Shalonda my favorite cousin anyway. So I mean, look, stop playing with me.
Yeah. And all of those things, all of those thoughts aren't just applicable for Minneapolis. It's
it's everywhere.
Just everywhere. I'm just using that as an example. I'm not trying to pick on
it's everywhere.
The
we went down to South LA 2 years ago now?
Yeah.
And there were places in LA that were still down from the riots of 92. Y'all, it's going to be 30 years next year. April 29th. Mm-hmm. It's going to be, 30 years. And so when we look at the devastation and the ruin behind a riot, it's like, there are some things that never get built back up. But then it's one thing just to, clear out the space and now it's just like an open lot. But a lot of those buildings, they just sit there, just burnt out. Now it's just got a fence around it. Fence is half falling down. And this is what people, drive by every day, what they're seeing every day. It's just depressing.
And when there's no alternative, there's no lighthouse of what else is possible.
Mm-hmm.
It gets very discouraging for that community because they literally think there is nothing else possible.
Yeah.
And I mean, I remember when you and I started conversations, you had kind of only seen the world one way. And I kept saying, well, there's another possibility available. Like, you could, like, do this instead. It was, like, mind-blowing for you. You never thought about that. Like, I could, but you'd only ever seen life show up this one way. And so, I think that having those lighthouses is vital. But then the other part of the trauma down there is the law enforcement. That they were also, some of those officers thought they were going to die.
When they burned down the police station, they got trapped inside.
Yeah. And so those were some harrowing stories that we heard of the trauma that those people faced. And, it's just the riots have far-reaching impacts. While news cycles change and have moved on, those people
are still living there.
They're still living it, and it is difficult. And so
I think this goes to even why I say that, I think when we look at issues of policing and how many people say that it's just due to police brutality and systemic, issues within the police force, I actually think that it's due more to PTSD than to, this issue of, well, all cops are racist and things like that. I think, if you try to burn me out in the building that I'm in, you're trying to kill me in the building, and now I have to go down the next day and sit here to protect this block from the people who just tried to burn me out the day before. I'm going to be extra heightened and extra aware. And, the community on one hand has a view of police. Some within the community, I'm not going to say the entire community, some within the community have a view of police that they're just out to get them. And then you have police who have very real experiences of, now a burned building where they're trapped inside and, the community is out to get them. And then when they meet head to head, it's two people or two groups with a lot of trauma. And at the end of the day, somebody is going to have to go home. Somebody wants to go home. And so at the end of the day, it's like, well, is it going to be me or you? Who's going to go home? And I can guarantee it's going to be me. I'm going home. And so I think those things tend to escalate the conversation of, systemic racism or systemic injustice. But it's really more to do with the PTSD that the community and the police force both experience. And now they're pitted against each other.
Antonia, who lives there in the area, she says, I have Christian entrepreneur
I got to meet her. I was so excited.
Entrepreneur friends here in Minneapolis, and they even offer counsel to other business owners, are really supportive of each other. But it seems like a very small group struggling to reach the greater community. Absolutely. And that's why Jesus calls it salt and light. It starts as a mustard seed, and so one of the things my husband has taught me over the years is not to focus on the smallness of it or even the fruit necessarily. It's that you're making the effort, you're showing up, you're building the kingdom of God in your little area. And I think there's so much prosperity down there that could be marshaled for other things. I mean, it's a lot of money in a lot of areas. And so even if individuals don't have time, because I saw a comment earlier, like people are too busy to do. Okay, so some individuals are too busy, but a lot of those churches have huge staffs.
Mm-hmm.
They could redeploy one or two staff members to get a creative vision of what they could do for that community and have paid staff, and then build a volunteer program. And like there's things that could be done if people would think creatively about that.
I agree. Kevin said, yes, it's PTSD. Cops that work in violent areas need to come off the beat the way soldiers come back home for a break from Afghanistan. Yes. I think that we are so quick to make a judgment and make everything about race, to make everything about this racial essentialism and hierarchy and power structures and things like that, and not
entertain any other
not
ideas.
entertain any other idea, but not slow down. Like sometimes we just can't be quick to a judgment. We need to slow down and actually do some investigation and figure out what is going on. Why are there disparities? Well, not every disparity is an injustice, one, but two, if there are disparities that are unjust, it may actually have nothing to do with racism at all. It could be a myriad of other issues, but we're so conditioned by culture to just think, well, that's racism.
Yeah.
It's automatically racism. So yes. Eric Muldrow from Code Red Conversations speaks so well on law enforcement's inner workings. I wonder if he would have any insight on PTSD for cops. Did we talk about that when he was on our show?
I don't think so. We did informally before we streamed.
Mm-hmm.
We were asking him some questions about that, but we actually had a long conversation with a friend that I really hope we can get him on the podcast in the new year. And he, I won't disclose who he is because I don't want to out him.
He's ex-law enforcement.
Yeah, he's ex-law enforcement, very high up in a major city. He was like second in command in a major U.S. city. And he has some really good thoughts about that from his experience. And also he's a minority and has some interesting thoughts. I really hope we can get him on in the new year as to introduce him to people.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No.
Lori says, I agree that people should reach out. I think all of us, myself included, need to prioritize committed relationships to encourage and help one another grow in Jesus. Yes, I think that, again, it comes down to identity, understanding our own identity, and then understanding how we interact with other people based on their identity, they being created in the image of God. So what does it mean when you're created in the image of God? How do I interact with someone who is created in God's image? What does that mean? Whether they are a believer or not, they are still created in God's image. So how do we reach out to people and do Matthew 28:19? How do we evangelize? How do we, encourage people to work because they are created in God's image? There's a lot that goes into the conversation of identity. And I guess the Lord just has me on identity. It's been a minute. But
I think she needs to write a book.
It's so real.
On identity?
If we don't understand our identity, everything else goes by the wayside. Why? Like if I can't, I just can't, like.
Remember when I used to tell you that and you would just look at me cross-eyed?
Rebuke,
You'd
open
be like,
rebuke.
What are you talking about?
I can't just, it even impacts evangelism. Like, how long was Jesus with them before we get to Matthew 28:19, now go?
Yeah.
Understanding who you are, understanding whose you are, understanding what all of that means, understanding what identity means for the person who is not a believer, because just because you are created in God's image doesn't mean you're a child of God. But then what does it also mean for the child of God, and how do we participate? I just think that if we had better understanding of our identity, it would impact the way that we love one another and the way that we would love and walk with people who may be still in culture. How do I engage with them? How do I have conversations with them?
Joel asked a really interesting question. Do you ever discuss the significance of how expectations of how money works in the family varies by culture, and how that might systemically affect wealth. Kevin, you need to go somewhere.
Yeah, I came with him.
Yeah.
Wait, ask Joel's question again. Sorry, Kevin almost took me out. Do you ever discuss the significance of how expectations of how money works in the family varies by culture and how that might systemically affect wealth? You know, I think
because I mean, in Jewish culture, they have a lot of beliefs about money that I would argue some of them are pretty deeply rooted in Scripture.
yes, but I also think that, and I don't know. I don't know if it's. I think there is impact by culture, yes, but I
Yeah.
think it's more in relation to your socioeconomic status and socioeconomic culture. So usually what we find is that poor people interact with money along the same lines, whether they're white, black, or anything else. When you're middle class, you interact with money in a certain way, white, black, or anything else. And the higher socioeconomic as well. And so I think that there might be some cultural significance to it, but I more than anything think that we should probably work at desegregating wealth or desegregating poverty and looking at how do these things run across socioeconomic lines, because I honestly think that you'll find more similarities based on socioeconomic compatibilities or socioeconomic relations or relationships.
Now, when you were in South Africa, did you notice that there was those same issues?
With money?
Yeah,
Yes.
across it was more of the poverty. People in poverty interact with money a particular kind of way.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's what makes me think that it is more socioeconomic than, along a color line or an ethnicity line.
Or a cultural line.
Yeah. I don't know. That's just what my thoughts are right now. I can give it some more thought.
It's an interesting question.
It is. And I'm not saying that there's nothing to it. This is just where my thoughts are right now. Because yeah, I feel like in South Africa, whether, people were black, colored, white, if they were poor, I found that they interacted with money a certain way. Now, also in working in social service, I've worked with people across the board, racially across the board, who are lower socioeconomically or socioeconomic status, and they all participate or tend to participate with money in a pretty specific way. So
that's interesting.
Yeah.
So we're almost done. Can I talk real quick about my podcast?
Can we talk really quick about Giving Tuesday afterwards?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So I just want to alert everyone, while I was in Minneapolis, I was able to record a podcast on the intercultural something. It's some assessment used in higher ed.
The IDI.
IDI, yeah. And but it's also being used in a lot of mission sending agencies and Christian higher ed, and even in Christian schools for administrators and teachers. So go check out my podcast with Heather Peterson, who teaches at the University of Northwestern in St. Paul, Minnesota. She teaches in the literature and English department. And I think that many of you will find the podcast interesting, in terms of equipping and being more informed about how some of these things have come into, what's the pathway they've come into Christian higher ed.
You don't want to say anything else about it?
No.
Okay. Well, there's that. It was a really good podcast. I thought it was
thank
informative.
You, Laura. She said she liked it. I had one person who listened to it. Look, she's right there. I'm very excited.
Stop it. She's such a mess. Okay. And before we go, where are you going?
Over here. Because you're going to talk
She
about
just
things.
rude, y'all. Can y'all pray for her, please? Giving Tuesday is coming up. Giving Tuesday, for many nonprofit organizations, is a huge day within the organization, where we encourage people and ask people to give to support the mission of the organization. And so we are ramping up for our Giving Tuesday. We will have a special gift for anyone who gives. Giving Tuesday is really the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, where people are encouraged to support nonprofits. And so please be on the lookout for information about Giving Tuesday, the gift that will be coming. If you support on Giving Tuesday with a specific dollar amount, I'll tell them what the gift is. The gift is going to be a conversation with Dr. Harold Felder that we're doing that will really look at a lot of interesting issues regarding, how can I best say it?
White Christianity versus
White Christianity versus Black Christianity. I was trying to think of a better way to say it, but Ben Lou is on here. What? He is gracing us with his presence. Hello. And so please consider giving to the Center for Biblical Unity. Last year, we were able to raise, I think, $15,000 in a 24-hour period. And we are looking to, continue our ministry. I think, that's the importance of the giving, is that it continues to allow the work of CFBU to go to people so that we can tell the truth about our identity in Christ and what that means, how our identity in Christ impacts our unity. It impacts the way we love. It impacts our culture. In John 17, I want to say it's verse 23, and y'all hear me talk about this a lot, but Jesus says, I and them and you and me. And he goes through all of that. But then after he says all of that, he says, so that the world may know. That the world may know our unity is for a reason. And as you support the Center for Biblical Unity, you continue to promote the conversation of biblical unity. It's not a progressive gospel. It's not a social gospel. It is the historic Christian truth, the faith. Defend the faith once for all given to the saints. That is our goal. And we do that by encouraging people to get out of the cultural conversations of whiteness and blackness and white church and white evangelicalism and black church and all of these things, and come back into the historic faith and have conversations based on the gospel, based on the scriptures. And so please just keep an eye out for it. And if you are able, we ask that you would please give on Giving Tuesday. And with that, I am out of here. She already left. You guys, we are so thankful for you. We are definitely blessed by your support and your friendship. And we'll see you next week. No, we won't. Next week is Thanksgiving, right? Yeah, so we won't see you next week. But maybe we'll do a little something special in the week or something like that. We are praying for you. Please pray for us. Pray for wisdom for us. We could definitely use a ton of wisdom. All right. Love you guys. Bye.